The first thing Vivian Harrington noticed about the man beside seat 2B was not his face. It was the faded canvas backpack at his feet. She stopped in the aisle so abruptly that the passenger behind her nearly walked into her shoulder. For a moment, the first-class cabin of Pacific Meridian Flight 418 seemed to narrow around her. Cream-colored seats, soft overhead lighting, the quiet rustle of jackets being folded away, and beyond the oval windows, the bright late-afternoon sky over Honolulu. Vivian looked at the man, then at the number above the row, then back at the man. "Excuse me," she said. "I think you may have the wrong seat." The man glanced at his boarding pass. He was in his mid-40s, with short black hair touched by grey at the temples. A calm face and the kind of posture that made him seem unhurried, even while everyone around him was rushing. His pale blue shirt was clean but simple, his sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. Nothing about him announced importance. "I have 2B, he said. Vivian's expression tightened. "That's the seat beside mine." "Yes." She gave a small, disbelieving laugh and turned toward the front galley. "Could someone help us, please?" A flight attendant named Claire approached with the practiced warmth of someone used to solving problems before an aircraft door closed. "Is everything all right?" Vivian held up her phone, where her boarding pass glowed on the screen. "I'm in 2A. I booked this cabin weeks ago, and I specifically selected this row because I needed a quiet flight. There must be some mistake." Claire checked the man's boarding pass, then Vivian's. "There isn't a seating error, Ms. Harrington. Mr. Reyes is assigned to 2B. The man gave a polite nod. Gabriel Reyes. Something flickered across Vivian's face. Not recognition, but resistance. "I'm sure Mr. Reyes is perfectly nice. That isn't the point. I have a major presentation tomorrow morning. I need to work. I was told the cabin would be lightly booked." Claire's smile remained professional. "I understand, but every seat in first class is assigned tonight." Vivian looked around as though the cabin itself had failed her. "Then move me. I can check, but I don't believe there are other open first-class seats." Gabriel stepped slightly into the aisle, giving her room. "If there's another seat in the same cabin and it makes things easier, I don't mind switching." His tone was helpful, but Vivian heard it as interference. "I wasn't asking you," she said. A silence opened between them. It was not dramatic at first. No one gasped. No one raised a voice. A businessman across the aisle looked up from his tablet, then looked down again. Claire paused for half a second before continuing. "Ms. Harrington, I can check the cabin. If nothing is available, you'll need to use your assigned seat." Vivian exhaled through her nose. She had spent 4 days at the Aurelia Hospitality Summit in Waikiki, smiling through panels, posing for photographs, answering questions about premium travel, guest expectations, and the future of luxury. She was tired of smiling, tired of people telling her what could not be done, tired of pretending every inconvenience deserved patience. She glanced again at Gabriel's backpack. Earlier that afternoon, she had seen a man who looked like him near a service corridor at the resort, helping an older maintenance worker move a stack of presentation equipment. The image had lodged in her mind. In her exhaustion, she decided the explanation before asking for one. "Were you working at the summit?" she asked. Gabriel looked at her. "I attended part of it." "Right." Vivian nodded as if that confirmed everything. "Then perhaps your travel desk made an error with the booking." Gabriel's eyes rested on her for a quiet moment. "My travel arrangements are correct." Claire returned after checking 2 rows. "I'm sorry, Ms. Harrington, there are no other seats available in this cabin." Vivian stared at her. "So that's it?" "That's the seating assignment." Vivian lowered her voice, though not enough to keep nearby passengers from hearing. "I paid nearly $3,000 for this ticket. I have a board presentation in San Francisco in the morning. I need to prepare confidential materials, and I'm supposed to accept that I have no control over who is placed beside me." Gabriel's expression changed, almost imperceptibly. Not anger, something closer to disappointment. "Everyone here paid for a seat," he said. Vivian turned toward him. "And I said I wasn't speaking to you." This time the businessman across the aisle did not look back at his tablet. Claire's voice became firmer. "Ms. Harrington, Mr. Reyes has done nothing wrong. You may sit in 2A, or I can ask the gate staff whether there is an available seat in another cabin before we close the door. The suggestion struck Vivian like an insult. Another cabin? Gabriel bent to lift his backpack from the floor. I can step out for a moment while you decide. He moved into the aisle, allowing Vivian to reach the window seat. His calmness made her feel strangely exposed. She wanted an argument she could win. Instead, he offered space. As Vivian slid into 2A, she placed her leather work tote on her lap with a sharp movement. Gabriel settled into 2B, fastened his seatbelt, and took a small notebook from his backpack. No expensive laptop, no assistant, no visible sign that he belonged to the world Vivian had spent 20 years climbing through. She opened her own computer and began pulling up tomorrow's presentation, determined to erase the last 5 minutes from her mind. She did not notice the young woman in row 4 lowering her phone after recording part of the exchange. She did not notice Claire glance once more toward Gabriel with an apologetic expression, and she certainly did not notice the name printed in small letters at the top of Gabriel's notebook, Aurelia Hospitality Group. For the past 6 weeks, Gabriel Reyes had been reviewing the company Vivian believed she understood better than anyone. He knew her name before she stepped onto the aircraft. He knew the title of the presentation waiting on her laptop. He knew the board meeting scheduled for 8:30 the next morning. And he knew about the growing stack of employee feedback reports that had reached his private office in San Francisco. He had not boarded Flight 418 to test Vivian Harrington. He had not planned a confrontation. He had not expected to sit beside her at all. But as the aircraft doors closed and the engines began their low, steady rise, Gabriel looked down at the notebook in his hands and understood that the meeting waiting for them in California had already changed. Vivian believed the uncomfortable moment was over. For Gabriel, it had just begun. The aircraft lifted over the blue edge of Oahu just after sunset, banking north until Waikiki became a thin line of light behind them. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere softened into the quiet rhythm of a long evening flight. Window shades lowered, headphones appeared, laptop screens glowed against dimmed ceiling lights. Vivian worked with rigid concentration, trying to prove that nothing had happened. Her presentation filled the screen in front of her. The title slide read, "Building Trust at Scale, the Next Era of Aurelia Service." Beneath it was her name, her position, and a photograph taken 2 months earlier in which she stood on a hotel rooftop overlooking San Francisco, confident and perfectly composed. Tomorrow's meeting mattered more than most people understood. The board was reviewing a major restructuring of Aurelia's guest experience division. If Vivian's proposal passed, she would gain authority over operations at 17 properties across the western United States. It would be the largest expansion of her role since she joined the company 15 years earlier. She had spent months preparing for it. Beside her, Gabriel wrote in his notebook. He did not look at her screen. He did not make conversation. He did not seem irritated. That bothered Vivian more than open annoyance would have. After 20 minutes, she finally glanced sideways. "What are you writing?" Gabriel looked up. "Notes. For work?" "Yes." She waited for him to elaborate. He did not. Vivian returned to her slides. "You said you attended the summit. For part of the afternoon." "Which session?" "The leadership panel." Vivian remembered that panel. She had moderated it in a ballroom overlooking the ocean, speaking about the difference between service and hospitality. She had told the audience that the strongest organizations were built when every employee felt seen. "You were there for my session?" she asked. "I was." "And?" Gabriel closed his notebook. "How you speak well." She had expected more. Vivian waited, but he offered nothing more. "What do you do, Mr. Reyes?" "I work with companies." "As a consultant?" "Sometimes." She smiled faintly. "That explains the notebook." Gabriel returned the smile, but there was no mockery in it. "Maybe." Claire came through the cabin offering sparkling water, coffee, tea, and a light meal. Vivian requested mineral water with lemon. Gabriel asked for coffee. When Claire handed him the cup, she said quietly, "Again, I'm sorry the boarding process was uncomfortable." Gabriel shook his head. "You handled it professionally." Vivian looked at the dark window. The words irritated her. Not because they were hostile, but because they made her feel like the only person in the row who had not acted professionally. She tried to focus on slide 12. Retention, leadership consistency, employee confidence. The words seemed suddenly louder than they had the night before. 2 rows behind them, a pair of men were discussing tomorrow's board meeting in voices low enough to be private, but not low enough to disappear completely. Vivian recognized one voice first. Daniel Cho, Aurelia's vice president of finance. She turned slightly toward the window, appearing to study her screen while listening. "I heard Reyes flew in from Manila yesterday," Daniel said. "Then straight to Honolulu." The other man replied, "He was at the summit for maybe 2 hours. Didn't tell half the executive team he was coming." Vivian stopped typing. Reyes. The surname was common. She told herself that immediately. Daniel continued. "He's been more involved lately. Employee pulse surveys, property reviews, direct interviews. I've never seen him this hands-on." "Is that why the meeting got moved to 8:30? "Probably. He requested the change himself." Vivian slowly looked at Gabriel. He was reading a printed report now. The cover page was turned partly away from her, but she could see a navy line across the top and a familiar silver emblem near the corner. Aurelia. Her stomach tightened. She looked back at her laptop. On the lower right corner of her presentation, in tiny corporate text, was the same emblem. No, she thought. It could still be coincidence. There were thousands of employees, consultants, vendors, investors, and contractors connected to Aurelia. Then Daniel spoke again. "The founder's office asked for all executive conduct summaries going back 18 months. The other man gave a quiet whistle. "Including Harrington's division. Especially Harrington's division." Vivian's fingers went still above the keyboard. Her name. Her division. She felt heat climb up her neck. Gabriel turned a page. At the top of the report, for less than a second, Vivian saw a handwritten note. G. Reyes. She looked at his face carefully now. She had seen old photographs of Gabriel Reyes, but he rarely appeared in company publicity. The other founder had become the public face while Gabriel stayed largely out of view. Vivian opened the company website on her laptop, using the onboard connection. Her hands were cold now. She searched his name. The page loaded slowly. Then the photograph appeared. Gabriel Reyes, co-founder and executive chairman. She stared at the screen. The photograph was older, but the eyes were the same. Vivian looked at the man beside her. Gabriel noticed. For the first time since takeoff, their eyes met, and neither looked away. The cabin seemed suddenly too quiet. "Mr. Reyes," Vivian said. "Yes?" Her voice lost the crisp certainty it had possessed at the gate. "Gabriel Reyes?" "That's right." She closed her laptop halfway, as if the screen itself had become embarrassing. "I didn't realize." "I know." 3 words. Calm. Unadorned. Vivian swallowed. "I think we started badly." Gabriel studied her for a moment. "We started honestly." She frowned. "I'm not sure what that means." "It means neither of us knew this conversation was coming." Vivian's pulse quickened. "Look, I was tired. I had been working all day. I thought there was a seating mistake." Gabriel nodded. "You did. And I probably sounded sharper than I intended." "You did." Vivian pressed her lips together. His agreement offered her nowhere to hide. "I hope you understand that I would never intentionally disrespect someone in your position." Gabriel's gaze shifted to the dark window, where their reflections floated over the black Pacific. "That sentence," he said quietly, "is more important than you realize." Vivian felt the meaning before she fully understood it. Someone in your position. She had meant it as respect. He had heard the condition inside it. "I mean anyone," she corrected quickly. "Obviously." Gabriel closed the report and placed it inside his backpack. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "the board will review more than your restructuring proposal." Vivian stared at him. "What else?" "Leadership feedback from your division, property-level reports, exit interviews, a number of concerns about how decisions are communicated and how junior staff are treated when they disagree with senior leadership." Her face hardened on instinct. "Every executive gets complaints." "I agree. High standards make people uncomfortable. Sometimes. You cannot run a luxury company by making every decision based on whether someone's feelings are hurt. Gabriel's tone remained even. That isn't what the reports say. Vivian looked toward the aisle, suddenly conscious that Daniel Cho was only a few feet away. Are you investigating me? She whispered. I'm trying to understand the organization I helped build. And this flight changes that? Gabriel considered the question. It gives me context. Vivian leaned back, her presentation forgotten. For years she had believed preparation could solve almost anything. A difficult meeting could be rehearsed. A weak quarter could be explained. A skeptical board member could be persuaded with data. But there was no slide for the moment when the stranger beside you became the person whose questions you had spent months avoiding. Gabriel reopened his notebook. Vivian stared at the title on her laptop, Building Trust at Scale. For the first time, she wondered whether she actually knew how. By the time Flight 418 crossed the California coast, Vivian had rewritten her apology 6 times in her head and rejected every version. The first sounded too defensive. The second sounded rehearsed. The third sounded as though she were apologizing because Gabriel mattered, which was precisely the impression she now feared she had already created. Eventually, she said nothing at all. Gabriel did not seem interested in forcing the conversation. He spent the final hour reading. Occasionally, he underlined a sentence or wrote a note in the margin. His patience was not passive. Vivian began to understand that. He was paying attention with the concentration of someone who had learned not to rush judgment, even when judgment would have been easy. At 11:17 p.m. local time, the wheels touched down at San Francisco International Airport. Phones came back to life almost immediately. Vivian's began vibrating before the aircraft reached the gate. 1 message from her assistant, then 3, then 9. She opened the first. Call me as soon as you land. Something from the flight is circulating online. Her chest tightened. She opened the next message. A link. The video was 47 seconds long. It began after Claire had already checked the boarding passes. Vivian heard her own voice through the tiny speaker. I paid nearly $3,000 for this ticket. I need to prepare confidential materials, and I'm supposed to accept that I have no control over who is placed beside me. Then Gabriel's voice. Everyone here paid for a seat. Then hers. I said I wasn't speaking to you. The clip ended with Claire explaining that Gabriel had done nothing wrong. The power of the clip came from something quiet and hard to explain away. Vivian looked impatient and completely certain that another person occupying an assigned seat was a problem someone else should fix for her. The caption above the video read, Executive-looking passenger refuses assigned seat situation because she needs control over who sits beside her. Calm guy never raises his voice. The young woman who posted it had not named Vivian. Someone else had. A reply contained a screenshot from the Aurelia Summit that afternoon. Isn't that Vivian Harrington from Aurelia Hospitality? Another user had placed the summit clip beside the airplane video. In one, Vivian spoke on stage about trust. In the other, she spoke impatiently to a stranger and a flight attendant. The contrast was doing the rest. Vivian's breathing became shallow. Gabriel's phone buzzed once. He looked at it, read something, and slipped it into his pocket. You've seen it? She asked. Yes. I didn't know anyone was recording. I don't think people usually do. She looked at him sharply, then realized he was not being cruel. He was stating a fact. The seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers stood. Overhead bins opened. The practiced order of arrival filled the cabin. Vivian remained seated for several seconds. Mr. Reyes. Gabriel paused beside the row. I am sorry, she said. This time she did not mention exhaustion. She did not mention the ticket price or tomorrow's presentation. The words were quieter than before. Gabriel nodded once. Thank you. It was not forgiveness, but it was not rejection either. Outside the aircraft, the terminal was nearly empty compared with the afternoon rush. Cleaning crews moved between gates. Digital signs reflected on polished floors. The airport smelled faintly of coffee and recycled air. Vivian walked quickly toward baggage claim, calling her assistant, Nicole. Nicole answered on the first ring. Vivian, don't post anything. I wasn't planning to. Good. Communications is already drafting a response. A response to what? It's a 47-second video. It has 2 million views. Vivian stopped walking. What? It was picked up by 3 business accounts because of the summit clip. People are connecting your talk about trust with what happened on the plane. Vivian closed her eyes. Has the board seen it? A pause. Daniel Cho was on the flight. I know. And Gabriel Reyes was apparently sitting beside you. Vivian opened her eyes. I know that too. Nicole went quiet. You knew? I found out in the air. Oh. That single syllable contained more concern than a paragraph would have. Vivian resumed walking. Tomorrow's meeting is still happening, as far as I know. Then we focus on that. I'll address the video briefly, apologize, and move on to the restructuring proposal. Vivian, there's something else. She stopped again. What? Employees are commenting. Online? Some online. Some have emailed the internal ethics address. Communications says the number is rising. Vivian's grip tightened around her phone. About the flight? About you? The baggage carousel began turning nearby with a low mechanical hum. Vivian stared at the silver belt as suitcases appeared one by one. What are they saying? Nicole lowered her voice. Mostly that the video reminds them of meetings. Times when people felt dismissed. Times you change plans without listening to the property teams. A few former employees say they left because they never felt heard. Vivian felt annoyance rise, immediate and familiar. That's ridiculous. Every major restructuring creates unhappy people. I'm just telling you what's happening. They're using a viral moment to settle old frustrations. Maybe, but tomorrow's board packet was updated tonight. Vivian's stomach dropped. By whom? The founder's office. Across the baggage hall, Gabriel stood near a pillar with his backpack over one shoulder. An older man approached him, smiling warmly, and shook his hand. Vivian recognized him after a moment. Samuel Ortega, Aurelia's chief operating officer. Samuel had driven to the airport himself. No limousine, no media team. Just a dark sedan waiting outside, and 2 men speaking quietly beneath the fluorescent lights. Vivian watched Gabriel listen while Samuel spoke. He did not appear triumphant. He did not look in her direction. If anything, he seemed tired. That unsettled her. She had spent years learning how to compete with ambitious people. She understood executives who wanted titles, bonuses, visibility, larger offices, more control. Gabriel did not seem to want anything from her, which meant tomorrow would not be a contest in the way she understood contests. Her suitcase arrived. She pulled it from the carousel and walked toward the exit. Outside, cold San Francisco air moved through the pickup lane. Vivian climbed into the car Nicole had arranged and finally opened the updated board packet on her tablet. Her restructuring proposal was still there, but it was no longer first. A new agenda item had been placed above it. Leadership Confidence Review, Western Guest Experience Division. Attached were 23 pages of employee feedback. Vivian stared at the screen as the car moved north toward the city. The first page contained no accusation, no dramatic language. Nothing she could dismiss as an attack. It contained statements. I stopped speaking in meetings because my ideas were usually cut off. I was told I needed to become more polished before I could represent the property in executive reviews. Decisions were often made before staff were asked for input. When Ms. Harrington entered a room, people focused more on avoiding mistakes than solving problems. Vivian scrolled faster. Some comments praised her intelligence. Some praised her discipline. Several acknowledged that her division had improved financially under her leadership. That made the criticism harder to reject. These were not enemies. They were people describing what it felt like to work around her. The car entered the city. Office towers rose ahead, their windows scattered with late-night light. Vivian had expected tomorrow to be the meeting that gave her more authority. Now she understood it might become the meeting that decided whether she should keep the authority she already had. Gabriel Reyes slept for less than 4 hours. At 6:15 the next morning, he was standing at the kitchen counter of his apartment in South Beach, waiting for coffee while fog softened the edges of the Bay Bridge outside the windows. His home was comfortable but restrained. Warm wood, clean lines, framed family photographs, books stacked in uneven rows, and a small woven basket his mother had brought from Quezon City years earlier. He had lived in San Francisco for most of his adult life, yet mornings like this still pulled him backward. He remembered arriving in California at 14, speaking careful English in classrooms, where he understood more than he was willing to say. His father had managed inventory for a food distributor. His mother had worked long shifts in a medical office. Neither had taught Gabriel to chase wealth. They taught him to avoid wasting opportunity. For years, he believed that lesson meant working quietly. Build the company, hire good people, set clear principles. Do not interfere in every decision simply because your name is on the paperwork. That philosophy had helped Aurelia grow from 3 properties to more than 40. It had also created distance. Gabriel had spent the previous night reading feedback that should have reached him months earlier. He carried his coffee to the dining table and opened the packet again. There were no catastrophic revelations, no hidden scandal, no single incident large enough to explain everything. Instead, there was repetition, a front desk manager who stopped offering suggestions because Vivian responded too quickly, a regional coordinator who said meetings felt like performances rather than discussions, a property director who respected Vivian's intelligence but wrote that people around her were becoming careful instead of creative, a former assistant who described Vivian as generous when things went well and distant when plans changed. Gabriel read every comment twice. At 7, his phone rang. His younger sister, Marissa, was calling from Daly City. "You're famous again," she said when he answered. Gabriel smiled despite himself. "That sounds unlikely. I have 3 cousins sending me the same airplane video." "Then we need more interesting cousins." Marissa laughed. "Mama has not seen it yet. I'm considering preserving her peace." "Please do." "So what happened?" Gabriel leaned back in his chair. With Marissa, he did not need executive language. A woman was frustrated about her seat. She assumed I was part of an arrangement that had gone wrong. She pushed too hard. "That is a very Gabriel description of someone being rude to you." She apologized. "Before or after she learned who you were?" Gabriel looked out at the fog. "After." Marissa became quiet. "That's different." "Yes?" "Are you angry?" He considered it. "Not exactly." "What are you?" "Concerned." Marissa sighed. "You always turn feelings into meeting agendas." "That is not true. You turned our argument about Thanksgiving into a shared spreadsheet." "That was efficient." She laughed again, then softened. "Gabriel, you don't have to prove you're calm all the time." He looked at the employee packet on the table. "I know." But he was not sure he did. After the call, Gabriel showered, dressed in a charcoal suit, and left for Aurelia headquarters near the Embarcadero. The lobby was already busier than usual when he arrived. Employees moved in small clusters, phones in hand. A few looked at him with recognition from the video and quickly looked away. Gabriel disliked being the subject of attention. That had never changed. Samuel Ortega met him near the elevators. "Communications wants guidance," Samuel said as the doors closed behind them. "They have a holding statement ready." "What does it say?" "That Aurelia is aware of the video, that the interaction occurred during personal travel, and that the company expects professionalism from all leaders." Gabriel frowned. "That sounds like we've already reached a conclusion. People expect a response. They can expect one after the meeting." Samuel nodded. He had worked with Gabriel for 11 years and knew when not to argue. On the 24th floor, an analyst named Priya Shah waited outside the boardroom with a folder pressed to her chest. "Mr. Reyes?" "Yes?" "I'm sorry to stop you. I work in property performance." Gabriel recognized her name from several reports. "What can I do for you, Priya?" She hesitated. "I submitted one of the feedback statements." Samuel glanced at Gabriel, then stepped farther down the hall to give them space. Priya lowered her voice. "I don't want anyone fired because of something I wrote." Gabriel listened. "I meant what I said," she continued. "But Miss Harrington is good at parts of her job. She sees problems fast. She pushed our team to improve things we had ignored for years. I wish she understood what happens after she leaves a room. Gabriel felt the sentence settle somewhere deeper than the others. What happens? People spend 10 minutes talking about whether she was upset instead of talking about the work. He nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. Priya looked relieved but still worried. I hope the board is fair. So do I. When she left, Samuel returned. That complicates the easy version, he said. There shouldn't be an easy version. At 8:20, board members began arriving. Vivian entered at 8:26. She wore a navy suit, carried a slim leather portfolio, and looked as composed as she had on stage in Honolulu. Only the slight tightness around her eyes suggested she had slept even less than Gabriel. For a moment, the two stood at opposite ends of the hallway. Vivian approached first. Good morning. Good morning. I'd like a few minutes before we begin. Gabriel looked through the glass wall into the boardroom. People were taking their seats. We have 4 minutes. That's enough. They moved into a small conference room nearby. Vivian closed the door. I reviewed the feedback, she began. All of it. Gabriel waited. Some of it is fair, she said. The admission sounded difficult. Some is missing context, but some is fair. What did you recognize? Vivian looked at the table rather than at him. I move too fast. I decide before people finish explaining. I assume silence means agreement. Gabriel said nothing. And yesterday, she continued, I decided there was a problem before there was one. That's also fair. She finally met his eyes. I know what the video looks like. What does it look like to you? Vivian hesitated, like a person who thought her discomfort was more important than someone else's dignity. Gabriel felt something in his shoulders release, not because the sentence fixed anything, because it was the first thing Vivian had said that morning without trying to control the outcome. A notification sounded on his phone. The meeting was ready. Vivian picked up her portfolio. Are you going to vote? She asked. Gabriel considered her question. No. She looked surprised. You're the executive chairman. And I was involved in the incident everyone is discussing. I'll present what I know, answer questions, and step out for the decision. Vivian stared at him. For the first time, she seemed unsure whether his restraint made her safer or more exposed. Gabriel opened the door. He had spent years believing distance made him objective. That morning, he was beginning to understand that leadership required something harder than distance. It required being present long enough to hear what people were afraid to say. The boardroom overlooked the grey water of San Francisco Bay, but no one looked at the view. 11 people sat around the long walnut table. Printed packets rested in front of each chair. A wall screen displayed the morning agenda. Outside the glass doors, assistants and legal staff moved quietly through the corridor, aware that something unusual was happening without knowing exactly what. Vivian took her usual seat near the center. Gabriel sat at the far end. At 8:32, Samuel Ortega closed the door. The meeting began without ceremony. The first 10 minutes were devoted to the airplane video because ignoring it would have made every other conversation feel dishonest. Aurelia's communications director summarized the public response. The clip had passed 6 million views overnight. Several industry publications had mentioned Vivian by name. 2 conference organizers had asked whether Aurelia planned to issue a statement. No clients had cancelled contracts. No major business damage had occurred, but attention was growing. One board member, Elaine Mercer, folded her hands over the packet. Vivian, before we discuss internal feedback, I'd like to hear from you directly. What happened? Vivian's instinct was to reach for the prepared statement in her portfolio. She could almost hear Nicole's voice from the rehearsal at 6 that morning. Keep it brief. Acknowledge the tone. Avoid over-explaining. Return to values. Vivian left the paper where it was. I was impatient, she said. I believed I had planned for a certain kind of flight, and when reality didn't match what I expected, I treated that mismatch like someone had failed me. No one interrupted. I thought there might be a booking issue. There wasn't. The flight attendant told me there wasn't. Mr. Reyes told me there wasn't. I kept pushing because I didn't like the answer. Elaine nodded slightly. And after you learned who he was, Vivian inhaled, I became much more careful. The honesty changed the room. Gabriel saw Daniel Cho glance up from his notes. Vivian continued, That is uncomfortable to admit. It should be. Samuel leaned back in his chair. Another board member, Thomas Bell, opened the employee feedback section. The video is one incident. These statements suggest a broader management issue. That is more important to me. Vivian nodded. For the next 40 minutes, the board worked through the reports one by one. The conversation was not a trial. There were no dramatic accusations. Several statements were balanced. Some employees admired Vivian's discipline. Others credited her with improving scheduling, guest response times, and property standards. Her division had performed well financially, but the same concern appeared repeatedly. People did not feel invited into decisions. Vivian had built a culture around precision, but not enough room around disagreement. When challenged, she became faster instead of more curious. When stressed, she became colder. When a plan failed, she focused on who had missed the standard before asking whether the standard itself had been clear. Vivian listened without interrupting. That alone was new. At one point, Elaine read from Priya Shah's statement. People spend more time guessing whether Ms. Harrington is disappointed than discussing the problem she once solved. Vivian looked down. I know who wrote that, she said. Gabriel watched her carefully. Does that matter? No. Vivian shook her head. It matters that I understand it. Thomas turned toward Gabriel. How much of this did you know before yesterday? Not enough. You received the report 6 weeks ago. I received summaries. I asked for the underlying material later. Why later? Gabriel could have blamed process. He could have said the founder's office managed dozens of priorities, that operational leadership belonged to other executives, that a chairman could not personally investigate every concern. All of it would have been true. None of it felt sufficient. Because I assumed the system would surface what mattered, he said. That assumption was convenient for me. Vivian looked at him. Gabriel continued. I have spent years telling executives that trust is built locally. I believed that if we hired capable leaders and gave them clear principles, I could remain at a distance, without losing touch with the culture. I was wrong about the second part. The room went still. Samuel's expression softened. He had tried to tell Gabriel something similar a year earlier, though not in those words. Elaine closed her packet. Then perhaps we have 2 leadership problems to discuss. Gabriel nodded. I think we do. For the first time that morning, Vivian looked less like an executive protecting her career, and more like a person hearing that the man who could most easily judge her was also willing to judge himself. The discussion shifted. Instead of asking only whether Vivian should remain in her role, the board began asking what repair would require. A 90-day leadership review, independent coaching, direct listening sessions with property teams, a temporary pause on the restructuring proposal, clear measures for employee confidence, not only financial performance. Vivian took notes. Then Daniel Cho raised the question everyone had been avoiding. What about the public side? The video is not going away. The communications director answered, We can issue a statement after the board decides on next steps. If Ms. Harrington remains in leadership, we need something more substantial than a generic apology. Vivian looked at Gabriel. What would you say? She asked. He shook his head. It isn't my apology. I know I'm asking what you would need to hear. Gabriel thought about Marissa's question that morning. Are you angry? He had spent years translating emotion into structure because structure felt safer. Policies could be revised. Budgets could be adjusted. Feelings were less predictable. I would need to hear something you actually believe, he said. Not something that protects your position. Vivian sat very still. Elaine looked at the clock. We have enough information to deliberate. Gabriel gathered his papers. As I said before we started, I won't participate in the vote. Thomas looked surprised. Even after hearing all this. Especially after hearing all this. Gabriel stood. The board should decide based on her leadership record and what it believes is best for Aurelia, not based on whether I personally felt disrespected on an airplane. Vivian's eyes followed him to the door. Before he stepped out, she spoke. Gabriel. He turned. It was the first time she had used his first name. I was wrong yesterday. He waited. And I think I've been wrong in smaller ways for longer than I wanted to see. No one moved. Gabriel nodded once and left the room. The hallway, outside, was nearly empty. Through the glass wall he could see the board begin its discussion. Vivian remained seated while others spoke around her. For the first time since the flight, Gabriel felt no satisfaction at the possibility that she might lose her position. He felt something heavier, responsibility. His phone buzzed with another notification about the viral video. He ignored it. At the end of the hallway, Priya Shah stood near the elevators talking with two co-workers. They noticed him and became quiet. Gabriel walked toward them. "You don't have to stop talking when I arrive," he said. Priya smiled nervously. "We were just discussing the morning." "Then keep discussing it." One of the co-workers, a young property analyst named Marcus Lee, looked uncertain. "Are you asking what we think?" Gabriel paused. "Yes." Marcus glanced at Priya, then back at Gabriel. "About the video or the company?" Gabriel looked through the glass toward the room where Vivian's future was being debated. "The company," he said. "The video already has enough people talking about it." Marcus gave a small smile. And for the next 15 minutes in a hallway with no microphones and no prepared questions, Gabriel listened. Marcus Lee did not answer immediately. He was 29, younger than most people who spoke directly to Gabriel without first rehearsing the sentence in their heads. He glanced at Priya, then at the elevator doors, as though checking whether the hallway itself was safe enough for honesty. "The company is good at asking for feedback," he said at last. "We're less good at what happens after we give it." Gabriel folded his arms loosely. "What happens?" "Sometimes nothing. Sometimes the answer is already decided. Sometimes a manager asks for input because the process says they should, not because the decision is still open." Priya gave Marcus a cautious look, but Gabriel nodded for him to continue. Marcus took a breath. "Ms. Harrington is the most obvious version of that, but she isn't the only one." That sentence mattered more to Gabriel than the rest. For the previous 12 hours, the public story had become easy. Vivian was the impatient executive from the airplane. Gabriel was the calm stranger who turned out to be the chairman. The internet loved clean roles because clean roles required no patience. Companies were not clean. Neither were people. "If Vivian left today," Gabriel asked, "would the problem disappear?" Marcus shook his head. "No." Priya answered more carefully. "Some people would feel relieved. But if nothing else changed, another person would eventually learn the same habits." The boardroom door opened before Gabriel could respond. Samuel stepped into the hallway and motioned to him. "They want you back for a question." Gabriel thanked Priya and Marcus, then returned to the room. Vivian was still seated in the same place, but the atmosphere had changed. Her portfolio was closed. The prepared statement remained untouched. Elaine Mercer sat with her reading glasses low on her nose, studying a new document on the screen. Thomas Bell looked toward Gabriel. "We have a problem with the restructuring packet." Gabriel sat down. "What kind of problem?" Daniel Cho rotated his laptop slightly so everyone could see. "The proposal states that 82% of regional staff support centralizing guest experience decisions under Vivian's office." Vivian straightened. "That number came from the readiness survey." "Yes," Daniel said, "but not from the full readiness survey." He clicked to another page. "The 82% figure reflects responses from directors and senior managers. When property supervisors and coordinators are included, support drops to 54%. The room became very still. Vivian looked at the screen. "That data was collected after the presentation deck was drafted." "Some of it was," Daniel said. "So not all of it." Samuel leaned forward. "Who decided which responses counted in the board packet?" Vivian's eyes moved from Daniel to the table. "I did." Elaine removed her glasses. "Why?" "Because the restructuring affected senior operating decisions. I believed the leadership sample was more relevant." "Then why does the slide say regional staff?" Thomas asked. Vivian did not answer immediately. Gabriel watched her carefully. This was different from the airplane. There was no irritated flight attendant, no viral video, no stranger whose importance she had misjudged. There was only a sentence on a presentation and the choice behind it. "I should have labeled the sample more precisely," Vivian said. Daniel's voice remained calm. "There's also an email from your office asking the analytics team to move open text concerns into an appendix marked non-actionable." Vivian looked up sharply. "Because most of those comments were about communication style, not operating structure." "Communication style is one of the reasons people oppose the structure," Elaine replied. Vivian's jaw tightened. For a second, Gabriel saw the old reflex return. She was about to explain faster, push harder, and turn the room into a problem she could dominate through certainty. Then she stopped. Her hands rested flat on the table. "I was trying to get the proposal approved," she said. No one spoke. "I believed it was the right plan. I still believe parts of it are right. I thought the board would get distracted by comments that didn't address the model itself." Thomas leaned back. "So you filtered out information because you believed we would give it the wrong weight?" Vivian's face showed the cost of hearing the sentence spoken back to her. "Yes," Elaine closed the file. "That is no longer a coaching issue." The words landed quietly. Gabriel looked at Vivian. She did not argue. The board had been discussing whether a talented executive with damaging habits could change. Now it had to consider something else, whether Vivian's need to control outcomes had entered the information she gave the people responsible for overseeing her. Samuel asked legal counsel to review the reporting standards attached to the restructuring proposal. There was no accusation of fraud, no suggestion that the numbers themselves were invented. The data existed. The methodology existed. The problem was presentation. A board had been asked to approve a major change using language broader than the underlying sample justified. Vivian requested 10 minutes to retrieve the original email chain from her office. Elaine agreed. When Vivian left the room, Gabriel remained seated. Thomas turned to him. "Did you know about this?" "No." "Would you have approved the restructuring?" "Before last night?" Gabriel asked. Thomas nodded. Gabriel considered the question honestly. "Probably." Daniel looked surprised. Gabriel continued. "The financial case is strong. The operational model is coherent. I would have assumed the employee support number meant what the slide said it meant." Elaine studied him. "Which returns us to your point about distance." "Yes." For years, Gabriel had believed a good system protected people from the weaknesses of individual leaders, but a system only worked if senior people asked inconvenient questions before a crisis made those questions unavoidable. Vivian returned carrying a printed email chain. She placed it in front of Elaine. "I want the full record included," she said. Elaine read the first page, then passed it to Thomas. The email was not explosive. That almost made it worse. Vivian had written that frontline responses were creating unnecessary noise around a strategically sound plan. She had asked the team to lead with decision-maker feedback and place broader comments in supporting material. No threat, no insult. No hidden scheme, just confidence so complete that other perspectives had become noise. Vivian sat down. "I see the pattern," she said before anyone asked. Gabriel looked at her. She gave a small, exhausted nod toward the screen. "On the plane, I thought the seating arrangement was wrong because it wasn't what I expected. In the survey, I thought the feedback was less useful because it wasn't what I expected. Different situation. Same reflex." Elaine's expression softened, but only slightly. "Recognition matters," she said. "So does consequence." The board voted to suspend consideration of the restructuring permanently. Then it placed Vivian on administrative leave for the remainder of the day, while an independent committee reviewed her leadership record and the accuracy of materials submitted to the board. A final employment decision would be made before 6 that evening. Vivian gathered her papers slowly. As she reached the door, she paused beside Gabriel. "Did you ask them to do this?" "No." She searched his face, perhaps looking for satisfaction. There was none. "That somehow makes it harder," she said. Then she walked out. The boardroom door closed behind her. Gabriel looked at the clock. It was 10:14 in the morning. Less than 11 hours had passed since Flight 418 landed, and for the first time, Vivian's future was no longer being shaped by a viral video. It was being shaped by the decisions she had made long before anyone pressed record. Vivian's office had always felt larger than it was. The corner windows looked east across downtown San Francisco, catching the pale morning light as it moved between towers. A long shelf displayed awards, photographs from hotel openings, framed magazine covers, and small gifts from properties she had helped launch. On the credenza sat a crystal plaque from the Aurelia Leadership Council with 3 words engraved beneath her name: clarity, discipline, results. That morning, the words looked incomplete. Nicole closed the office door behind them. "Administrative leave means you should probably hand me the company laptop," she said gently. Vivian looked at the computer on her desk. "Probably? I'm trying not to sound like legal." A tired smile almost appeared on Vivian's face. Nicole had been her executive assistant for 4 years, organized without being rigid and unusually willing to tell Vivian difficult things directly. Vivian unplugged the laptop and slid it across the desk. Nicole took it, but did not leave. "What?" Vivian asked. "Do you want me to say everything is going to be fine?" "No." "Good, because I don't know that." Vivian turned toward the windows. Below, Market Street moved with ordinary morning traffic. Buses stopped. Delivery vans pulled toward curbs. People crossed intersections holding coffee and looking at phones. The city had not changed because her career had become uncertain. "I worked 15 years for this company," she said. "I know. I took the Western Division from the weakest service scores in the portfolio to the highest. I know. I fixed properties everyone else had given up on." "I know that too." Vivian turned around. "Then why does it feel like 47 seconds on an airplane erased all of it?" Nicole's expression remained steady. "I don't think the 47 seconds erased anything." Vivian waited. "I think they made people look at things they had already learned to work around." The answer hurt because it sounded like the employee packet. Vivian lowered herself into the chair behind her desk. "Did you work around me?" Nicole hesitated. That was enough. "Tell me." Nicole set the laptop on a side table. "When you're focused, you move faster than everyone else. Most of the time I can keep up, sometimes I can't. When I can't, I stopped telling you early because I knew the conversation would become about why I hadn't solved it already." Vivian stared at her. "So you hid problems from me?" "No. I waited until I had solutions." "That is not the same thing. It feels different from this side of the desk," Vivian almost responded. "Almost." Then she leaned back. The old version of herself would have asked for examples and then challenged each one until the criticism dissolved into exceptions. She could feel that machinery starting inside her even now. Instead, she asked, "How long?" Nicole's shoulders lowered slightly. "Maybe 2 years." The office became quiet. Vivian looked at the photographs on the shelf. There she was, cutting ribbons, shaking hands, standing beside general managers whose names she remembered, because remembering names was part of being good at leadership. She had remembered names. She had learned quarterly numbers. She had flown overnight to rescue difficult openings. She had thought effort and care were the same thing. Her phone vibrated. Nicole glanced at the screen first. "Communications." Vivian answered. The director, Leah Morgan, spoke quickly, but without panic. One of Aurelia's largest travel partners, North Star Premier, had asked to postpone a joint campaign scheduled to launch the following week. They were not ending the relationship. They wanted distance from the current attention until the company announced its response. A leadership conference in Seattle had also removed Vivian from a panel scheduled for the following month. "Temporarily?" Vivian asked. Leah paused. They didn't use that word. Vivian thanked her and ended the call. Nicole did not pretend not to have heard. "That's fast," Vivian said. "It is. My name was valuable to those people yesterday." Nicole sat in the chair across from her. "So your name is visible. That's not always the same as valuable." Vivian looked at her sharply. Nicole lifted one hand. You asked me to stop making things easier to hear. A strange sound escaped Vivian, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. Apparently, I picked an ambitious morning for personal growth. For the first time since Honolulu, Nicole smiled. At 11:45, Vivian received a message from the Independent Review Committee requesting a written response to 3 questions: why she narrowed the survey sample, how she understood the repeated employee concerns, and what responsibility she believed she carried for the public incident. She opened a blank document on her personal tablet. For 20 minutes, she wrote like an executive. Context, strategic urgency, interpretation, intent. Then she read the page and hated it. Every sentence explained why her decisions had made sense to her. None explained what they had cost anyone else. She deleted the entire document. Nicole watched from the other side of the office. "What are you doing?" "Starting over." This time, Vivian wrote only what she could defend without presentation language. "I narrowed the survey because I believed the people closest to senior decisions understood the proposal best. I now understand that I also preferred their responses because they were more supportive of the plan I wanted approved." She stopped. The admission made her stomach tighten. She continued, "I treated disagreement as a problem to manage instead of information to examine. I have done that more than once." Another pause. "Regarding the flight, I was impatient and controlling. I assumed something was wrong because I had not chosen the person sitting beside me. When I learned Mr. Reyes's position, my behavior changed. That difference is embarrassing because it reveals that status affected the care I gave the situation." Vivian read the paragraph twice. For once, she did not soften it. At 12:20, Nicole's phone chimed. She read the message and looked up slowly. "What now?" Vivian asked. 12 property directors sent a joint note to the board." Vivian's fingers went cold. "What does it say?" Nicole hesitated, then handed her the phone. The message was respectful. That made it difficult to dismiss. The directors acknowledged Vivian's intelligence and results. They also wrote that confidence in the current leadership structure had become too low for the division to move forward effectively. They asked the board to appoint new leadership and give property teams a direct role in designing whatever came next. No one called her cruel. No one demanded punishment. They simply said they no longer wanted her to lead them. Vivian handed the phone back. For years, she had imagined losing her career as something dramatic, a catastrophic financial quarter, a public feud, a strategic failure visible on a chart. She had never imagined it might happen because enough people quietly stopped trusting her judgment. At 1:15, Gabriel stood in a small conference room 2 floors below, reading the same message. Samuel watched him reach the final line. "That will carry weight," Samuel said. "It should." "You still planning to stay out of the vote?" "Yes." Samuel studied him. "Even if they remove her?" Gabriel folded the letter and set it down. "Especially if they remove her." He walked toward the window. The easy thing would have been to believe Vivian's fall proved the system worked. Gabriel knew better now. The system had not worked. A passenger with a phone had noticed what an organization full of professionals had spent years learning to tolerate. At 2 o'clock, the review committee requested that Vivian return to the boardroom at 4. The final decision would follow. Vivian read the message once. Then she removed the crystal plaque from her credenza and placed it face down inside a cardboard box. At 2:30, Gabriel left Aurelia headquarters through a side entrance and walked toward the Embarcadero without telling anyone where he was going. The fog had lifted. Sunlight flashed against the bay, and a cold wind moved between buildings with enough force to tug at his jacket. He passed office workers eating late lunches on benches, cyclists moving through the waterfront lane, tourists photographing the Bay Bridge, and a delivery driver arguing cheerfully with someone through a headset. The ordinary noise helped. For most of the morning, every room Gabriel entered had become quiet because he was Gabriel Reyes. He hated that effect. He stopped at a small Filipino bakery cafe he had visited since his 20s. The place had changed owners twice and expanded into the storefront next door, but the glass case still held rows of warm pandesal, ensaymada, and small savory rolls behind handwritten labels. Marissa was already seated near the window. "You look terrible," she said. Gabriel sat across from her. "Good afternoon to you too." She pushed a paper bag toward him. "Eat." Inside were 2 warm pandesal rolls and a small container of chicken adobo she had brought from their mother's house. "Mama made this. She made enough food for 12 people because you had one stressful day." "That sounds right." Marissa watched him unwrap the bread. "So? So what? Are you going to make me drag the story out of you like we're 14? Gabriel took a bite before answering. "The board may remove Vivian this afternoon." Marissa's expression changed. "Because of the video?" "Not exactly." He explained the employee feedback, the survey presentation, the property director's letter, and his decision not to vote. Marissa listened without interrupting. When he finished, she stirred her coffee. "You sound guilty." "I'm responsible." That is not the same word. In this case, they overlap. Marissa leaned back. She had spent 18 years as a public school counselor and had little patience for corporate language, especially from her brother. "You built a company that became too large for you to know everyone," she said. "That does not mean you personally caused every bad meeting." "No, but I liked the distance." Marissa waited. Gabriel looked through the window at people moving along the sidewalk. "When we started Aurelia, I knew everyone. Housekeeping supervisors, front desk staff, maintenance crews, accountants. I knew who was having a hard month. I knew which property manager hated spreadsheets and which one could calm an angry guest in 30 seconds. And then you grew. And then I told myself growth required me to step back. It probably did. Some." Gabriel rubbed his thumb against the paper cup. "But eventually, stepping back became comfortable. I could talk about culture without being the person who had to sit in uncomfortable rooms." Marissa smiled faintly. "You do love principles from a safe distance." "Thank you." "You're welcome." His phone vibrated on the table. It was Samuel. Gabriel let it ring once before answering. "The committee finished its report," Samuel said. "They want the full board at 4. Vivian has been notified. Any recommendation?" "They're recommending removal from the executive role." Gabriel closed his eyes for a moment. "On what basis?" "Loss of leadership confidence, inaccurate framing of the restructuring data, and repeated management concerns that were never corrected. The airplane incident is listed as recent context, not the primary cause." "That's the right distinction." "There's more." Compensation reviewed her agreement. If the board removes her for leadership cause provisions, her unvested performance shares are cancelled. So is the annual incentive award. Gabriel looked down at the table. Vivian had spent years accumulating a package designed to reward long-term authority. Much of the wealth people associated with her was not cash sitting safely in a bank. It was future value tied to remaining in the position. "How much?" he asked. "Roughly 6.4 million at current valuation, plus this year's bonus." Marissa could not hear Samuel's words, but she saw Gabriel's face. "What?" she asked after he ended the call. He told her. She was quiet for several seconds. "That is a lot to lose in one day." "Yes. Do you think she should lose it?" Gabriel did not answer immediately. "I think agreements have consequences. I think the board has to decide whether it can trust her to lead. I also think people online will treat the number like a scoreboard. And you don't want that." "No." Marissa tore a piece of pandesal in half. "Then don't make it one." Gabriel looked at her. "If she loses her job," Marissa continued, "let that be about the company, not about you winning." He nodded. "That part I know." "Do you?" Gabriel smiled despite the weight in his chest. "You are very committed to making lunch unpleasant. It's free therapy. Eat your adobo." Across town, Vivian had made a different decision. At 3:15, she asked Nicole to invite the 12 property directors who were available to join a video call. Nicole stared at her. "Legal may not love that. I'm not asking them to change the letter." "What are you asking?" "I want to hear it from them." 9 directors joined. Their faces appeared in small rectangles across Vivian's tablet. Portland, San Diego, Honolulu, Napa, Seattle, Phoenix, Santa Barbara, Monterey, and Lake Tahoe. Vivian recognized every face. Usually she would have opened with an agenda. This time she said, "I read your letter. I'm not calling to argue with it. I want to understand what I made difficult." No one spoke at first. Finally, a director named Elena Park from San Diego answered, "You made uncertainty feel unacceptable." Vivian frowned slightly. "Explain." "If we came to you without a finished answer, you treated the unfinished part like lack of preparation, so people stopped bringing you problems early." A director from Portland nodded. "We waited until we could make things look clean." Another added, "And when you visited properties, everyone prepared for you instead of preparing with you." Vivian wrote the sentences down. She wanted to defend herself when someone mentioned a difficult opening in Phoenix. She remembered flying there at dawn, solving a staffing issue, staying until midnight. She could explain exactly why she had been impatient. She did not. For 40 minutes she listened. At the end, Elena Park said, "For what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad person." Vivian looked at the screen. "I'm not sure that's the question anymore." "No," Elena said. "It isn't." The call ended at 3:53. Vivian closed the tablet. Nicole stood near the door holding Vivian's coat. "It's time." Vivian looked once around the office. For 15 years, every promotion had moved her farther from the lobby and closer to the windows. She had always interpreted height as progress. Now, as she walked toward the boardroom, she wondered how much she had stopped seeing on the way up. At 4 o'clock, the boardroom shades were half lowered against the afternoon glare. Vivian entered alone. Nicole remained outside. Legal counsel sat near the far wall. The 11 board members were already in place, along with Samuel and Daniel. Gabriel occupied his chair at the end of the table, but there was no voting packet in front of him. Elaine Mercer began, "Vivian, the independent committee has completed its review. Before we discuss its recommendation, you may make a statement." Vivian placed her tablet on the table. She had written 3 versions during the previous hour. The first defended her record. The second emphasized growth and learning. The third sounded almost noble. She used none of them. "I want to correct something I said this morning," she began. Elaine waited. "I said some of the employee feedback was missing context. That may be true in individual cases, but I was using context as a way to make the pattern smaller." Thomas Bell looked up from his notes. Vivian continued, "I have been successful here. I also trained people around me to bring me polished answers instead of unfinished problems. I narrowed information when I thought broader feedback would slow decisions. Yesterday, I treated an assigned airplane seat like a problem because I had not chosen the situation myself. None of those things are identical, but I understand why the board sees a connection." Daniel folded his hands. "Do you believe you can still lead the division?" he asked. Vivian's first instinct was yes. She knew the business. She knew the properties. She knew the numbers better than almost anyone in the room. But at 3:15, 9 property directors had looked at her through a screen and described the ways they had learned to manage her instead of trust her. "I believe I could become a better leader," she said. "I don't know whether the division should have to wait for me to do it." Gabriel lowered his eyes for a moment. Elaine read the committee's findings in plain language. The review confirmed that Vivian's financial performance and operational achievements were significant. It also found repeated concerns about decision-making culture, employee confidence, and the presentation of the restructuring survey. The committee concluded that the division could not rebuild trust, while Vivian remained in the same position with the same authority. Its recommendation was removal from the role of Executive Vice President of Western Guest Experience, effective immediately. Under the terms of Vivian's compensation agreement, the decision would cancel her pending annual incentive and all unvested performance shares attached to continued executive service. The number did not appear in the official statement. Vivian knew it anyway. $6.4 million in projected equity, a bonus approaching $900,000, a role that paid more in 1 year than her parents had earned in several, her seat on Aurelia's leadership council, her company-funded travel privileges, her office, her authority over 17 properties. A life built around being needed in rooms like this one. Elaine asked Gabriel if he wished to add anything before leaving for the vote. He shook his head. This decision should not depend on me. Vivian looked at him. Would you forgive me? She asked suddenly. Several board members shifted, surprised by the personal question. Gabriel did not seem offended. I don't think forgiveness is the board's work, he said. I'm not asking the board. The room became silent. Gabriel considered her carefully. I accepted your apology on the plane, he said. What happens to your career is a different question. Vivian nodded. It was not comforting, it was fair. Gabriel stood and left the room. For 27 minutes, he waited in Samuel's office while the board deliberated without him. He did not check social media, he did not read the newest articles. He stood near the window and watched ferries cross the bay in slow white lines. At 4:41, Samuel received a message. They're done, Gabriel returned. Vivian was still seated. Elaine's voice was gentle but formal. The board has voted 8-2, with 1 abstention, to accept the committee's recommendation. Vivian's face did not change. Effective immediately. Your executive employment with Aurelia Hospitality Group is terminated under the leadership cause provision of your agreement. The words were quieter than Vivian had imagined losing everything would sound. No shouting, no dramatic exit, no applause. Just a decision entered into minutes. Elaine continued, the company will honor all earned salary and benefits through today. Unvested equity and the current incentive award are cancelled according to contract. You will receive independent counsel information regarding your rights to review the decision. Vivian nodded once. Understood. Thomas spoke next. For the record, this decision is based on the full leadership review, not simply the airplane video. I understand that too. Vivian gathered her tablet. As she stood, Daniel said, Your work here mattered. She looked at him. Apparently not enough. Daniel shook his head. That isn't what I said. Vivian held his gaze, then softened. No, it isn't. Outside the boardroom, Nicole was waiting with the cardboard box from Vivian's office. She had packed the photographs carefully. The crystal plaque lay on top. Vivian picked it up. Clarity, discipline, results. For years, those 3 words had described the leader she wanted to be. Now she understood what was missing. Listening. Aurelia issued a public statement at 5:10. It was brief. The company acknowledged the incident on Flight 418, confirmed that a broader leadership review had already been underway, and announced that Vivian Harrington was no longer employed by the organization. It stated that the board's decision reflected internal leadership concerns and governance standards, not public pressure alone. Gabriel insisted on one additional paragraph. Aurelia also accepted responsibility for allowing employee concerns to accumulate without adequate response and announced an independent review of leadership feedback systems across the company. Leah from Communications objected at first. That makes us look responsible. We are responsible, Gabriel said. The sentence ended the debate. By 5:30, Vivian's phone filled with notifications. The Seattle conference confirmed her removal from the program. An industry advisory council informed her that her seat, which was tied to her Aurelia position, had ended automatically. Her executive recruitment representative sent a message saying they should speak after the attention settled. North Star Premier formally postponed the campaign that had featured Vivian as one of Aurelia's public leadership voices. None of those losses was as large as the job. Together, they made the shape of her old life disappear with astonishing speed. At 5:46, Vivian walked through the lobby carrying a single box. Employees noticed. Some looked away. Some offered small nods. Priya Shah stood near the security desk. Vivian stopped. For a second, neither woman spoke. Then Vivian said, I read what you wrote. Priya's expression tightened. You were right. Vivian continued walking before Priya had to decide how to answer. Outside, the late afternoon wind moved sharply along the street. A car waited at the curb. Vivian placed the box beside her and looked back at the glass tower she had entered thousands of times, believing each floor represented something permanent. 20 hours earlier, she had been preparing for the promotion of her life. Now she no longer worked there, and the strangest part was that Gabrielle Reyes had never once asked the board to fire her. The apartment was silent when Vivian returned home. She lived on the 27th floor of a modern tower in Russian Hill. Pale stone, grey furniture, carefully chosen art, and a dining table for 8 that had hosted only 2 dinners. Vivian set the cardboard box on the kitchen island. For several minutes, she did nothing. The city glowed beyond the windows as evening settled over San Francisco. Farther away, the bay reflected the last thin light of the day. Her phone lay face down beside the box. It vibrated again. Vivian ignored it. She removed the items from the box one by one. A photograph from the opening of the Monterey property. A handwritten note from a hotel manager thanking her for staying through a difficult launch weekend. A framed magazine cover. The crystal plaque. At the bottom was the badge from the Honolulu summit. The badge still carried her name and title. Vivian Harrington, Executive Vice President, Aurelia Hospitality Group. Below it was the summit theme, Building Trust at Scale. Vivian sat at the kitchen island and stared at it. Her phone vibrated again. This time the caller was her father. She answered. "Hi, Dad? Are you home?" "Yes. I saw the company statement." Vivian closed her eyes. Her father, Richard Harrington, had spent 35 years running a commercial real estate firm in Sacramento. He had taught Vivian to arrive early, remember numbers, and never enter a negotiation without knowing what she wanted. She had believed competence was security. "I'm sorry," he said. "Me too." "Do you want me to call anyone?" Vivian almost smiled. Even now, his first instinct was action. "No. I know people on 2 hotel boards. When this calms down, we can—" "Dad," he stopped. "I don't need another board right now." Silence. "Okay." The word sounded unfamiliar in his voice. Vivian looked at the summit badge. "I think I need to understand why so many people were relieved when I left." Her father inhaled slowly. "That sounds painful." "It is." "Then maybe don't solve it tonight." Vivian looked toward the windows. For the first time all day, advice did not feel like an attempt to control her. Maybe not. They spoke briefly about her mother's garden and whether Vivian had eaten. After the call, she ordered soup from a neighborhood restaurant and left her phone in the bedroom while she waited. Across the city, Gabriel was still at Aurelia headquarters. Most of the executive floor had emptied. Samuel sat across from him, reviewing the next morning's schedule. "We need an interim head for the Western Division by 9, Samuel said. "Elena Park." Samuel looked up. "San Diego?" "Yes." She signed the letter asking for leadership change. "I know. She may not want the job. Then we ask, not assume." Samuel smiled faintly. "You learned something today." Gabriel leaned back. Apparently several things. They had already agreed on a 30-day listening process, new reporting rules for board presentations, and quarterly meetings between rotating employee groups and the board. Gabriel had also blocked a proposal to use the viral video in a corporate values campaign. "We are not turning Vivian's worst day into advertising," he said. Leah had called the idea reputation recovery. Gabriel called it exploitation. Samuel closed his folder. "You know the internet thinks—" "You destroyed her." Gabriel looked at him. "I didn't." "I know. But that is the story people like." "Then they can like the wrong story." Samuel stood to leave, then paused. "You could issue a personal statement." "No." "Why?" "Because this was never supposed to become a story about a powerful man teaching someone a lesson." Samuel considered that. "What is it about?" Gabriel looked at the employee packet still open on his desk. "About what happens when people stop listening before anyone notices they've stopped." After Samuel left, Gabriel called Marissa. She answered with, "Did you eat dinner?" "Hello to you too." "That means no." "I had lunch." "Food is generally expected more than once a day." Gabriel smiled and told her the board's decision. Marissa grew quiet. "Do you feel better?" she asked. "No." Good. He frowned. Good? If you felt great about someone losing a 15-year career, I would be worried about you. Gabriel looked toward the dark windows. I keep thinking about what Priya said. She didn't want Vivian fired because of her statement. And now? Now Vivian is gone and Priya still has to come to work tomorrow. So do thousands of other people. If the company feels exactly the same except for one empty office, then we learned nothing. Marissa was quiet for a moment. That sounds like your real job. Yes. At 8:43, Vivian finally looked at her phone again. There were more than 100 messages. Some were kind, some awkward, and several came from people she had not spoken to in years. She ignored the ones drawn mainly to the drama. One message came from Nicole. I'm not going to tell you this is secretly good. Today was awful. But for what it's worth, I think the version of you who listened this afternoon is someone I would work with again someday. Vivian read the message 3 times. Then she typed, Thank you for telling me the truth before it was comfortable. She deleted the sentence. It sounded polished. She tried again. Thank you for telling me the truth even when I made that difficult. She sent it. At 9:12, another email arrived. This one was from Aurelia's compensation administrator. Formal notice, cancellation of unvested performance shares, annual incentive eligibility and leadership council privileges, effective that day. Vivian opened the attached statement and watched numbers disappear line by line. For years, those numbers had represented freedom. Now they showed how much of her identity had been attached to a title. She closed the document. Then she opened a blank email addressed to Gabriel Reyes. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. The first sentence came easily. I am not writing to ask for my job back. Vivian stopped. For once she did not know what the second sentence should be. She stood and walked to the windows. The confrontation on Flight 418 had begun almost exactly 24 hours earlier. At that time, Vivian had believed the most important thing in the cabin was control over her seat, her schedule, her comfort, and the people around her. Now the title was gone. The bonus was gone. The equity was gone. The conference appearances were gone. The authority was gone. Even the story she had told herself about being the person who always knew what to do had gone quiet. She had lost nearly everything that made her feel untouchable. But standing alone in the apartment, Vivian recognized one thing that had not been taken from her. She could still decide what kind of person walked into tomorrow. She returned to the island and finished the email. I am not writing to ask for my job back. I am asking for something harder. If there are people who are willing to speak with me, I want to hear what I failed to hear when I had the authority to ignore it. I understand if the answer is no. She read it once. No strategy, no defense, no request for reputation management. Vivian pressed send. Across the city, Gabriel's phone lit up on his desk. He read the message slowly. Then he looked at the clock. 9:27 p.m. 24 hours after a woman on an airplane had looked at him and seen an inconvenience. Both of their lives were different. Gabriel did not reply immediately. Not because he wanted her to wait. Because, for the first time in a long time, he had learned that a thoughtful answer sometimes required silence first. Gabriel answered Vivian's email at 6:40 the next morning. He had been awake for nearly an hour, sitting at the small dining table in his apartment, while the city outside slowly changed from black to grey. The message had remained on his screen overnight. He had read it twice before going home, once before sleeping, and again when he woke. His reply was shorter than hers. I believe listening is worthwhile when people choose freely to be heard. I will ask an independent facilitator to contact those who submitted feedback. No one will be pressured to participate, and I will not attend unless they request it. If people say no, that answer has to be respected too. He paused before adding one final line. Learning cannot become another way to ask the people we disappointed to do work for us. Then he sent it. The sentence stayed with him on the drive to Aurelia headquarters. For years, Gabriel had treated good intentions like a kind of insurance. If the company hired decent people, wrote decent policies, and rewarded strong results, then decency would somehow reproduce itself through the organization. The previous day had stripped that belief down to something less comfortable. Culture was not what leaders said when things were calm. It was what other people learned they were allowed to do when leaders were not in the room. At 8:15, Gabriel walked into a conference room where 12 chairs had been arranged in a circle instead of around a table. Samuel stood by the window holding coffee. "You requested no table?" he asked. "People hide behind tables." Samuel looked amused. "You have spent 30 years hiding behind very expensive ones. Then I have experience." The first listening session began at 8:30. Gabriel had asked for volunteers from different levels of the company, not only executives. A front desk supervisor from Napa sat beside a revenue analyst. A maintenance coordinator from Monterey sat across from a regional manager. Priya Shah arrived carrying no folder at all. Gabriel opened with one rule. "Nothing said here will affect anyone's performance review, compensation, promotion, or reporting line. If you think I am wrong about something, say it while I am still in the room." No one laughed. That told him how much work remained. For the first 15 minutes, people spoke carefully. They used words like alignment, communication, and process. Gabriel recognized the language immediately because senior leaders had taught everyone to use it. It was professional, polished, and almost useless. Then Marcus Lee leaned forward. "Can I say something without making it sound constructive first?" Gabriel nodded. "Please." "People are afraid of wasting senior leaders' time." The room changed. A property manager added, "Sometimes we do not raise problems because we know the first question will be why we did not already fix them." Another employee said, "We celebrate people who solve emergencies. We do not celebrate the people who notice small problems early." Priya looked at Gabriel. "And when leaders visit properties, everyone wants the visit to go perfectly. That means you often see the building on its least honest day." Gabriel wrote that sentence down. He did not defend the travel schedule. He did not explain how many properties he had to visit or how difficult it was to see everything. He listened. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. When it ended, Gabriel remained in the room alone. His notebook was filled with phrases that were not dramatic enough to become headlines and were therefore more useful than most headlines. Ask earlier. Reward unfinished truth. Do not confuse calm rooms with healthy rooms. Samuel returned after everyone left. How bad? Gabriel closed the notebook. Normal. That does not sound reassuring. It is not supposed to. Across the city, Vivian woke at 7:23 without an alarm. For 15 years, mornings had begun with a schedule. Calls, flights, meetings, briefings. Her calendar used to tell her who she needed to be every half hour. That morning, the calendar was almost empty. She made coffee and stood at the kitchen island, wearing a sweatshirt she had not touched in months. The cardboard box from Aurelia remained where she had left it. She had turned the crystal plaque face down. Gabriel's reply arrived while she was staring at it. Vivian read the message slowly. Her first reaction was practical. Independent facilitator, voluntary participation, clear boundary. She understood the structure immediately. Her second reaction took longer. No one owed her access to their disappointment. That was new. When she had been an executive, information had arrived because her title required it. People answered her emails, joined her calls, prepared documents, changed travel plans, and entered rooms because her position gave her the right to ask. Now she had no such right. She typed back only 2 words. "I understand." At 9, her father called again with 3 names of people who might be able to place her on advisory boards. Vivian thanked him. Then she said no. "You cannot disappear," Richard warned. "If you leave a vacuum, people fill it with whatever story they want." Vivian looked toward the quiet living room. "Maybe I spent too much time filling every vacuum." Her father was silent. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." For most of her adult life, Vivian would have considered that sentence unacceptable. This time she let it stand. At 11:30, Nicole stopped by with Vivian's personal notebook and 2 framed photographs that had been left in a drawer. Nicole was no longer her assistant. The change was awkward enough that both women felt it immediately. Vivian poured coffee. "You don't have to check on me," she said. "I know." "Then why are you here?" Nicole shrugged. "Because yesterday was terrible, and I wanted to see if you ate breakfast." Vivian smiled faintly. Apparently everyone has decided food is the measure of my stability. It is a start. They sat at the dining table, the one Vivian rarely used. Nicole told her that Elena Park had agreed to serve as interim head of the Western Division for 60 days. Vivian felt a small tightening in her chest. The old reflex arrived instantly. Elena was talented but cautious, excellent with people but slower on financial decisions, strong at property operations, but untested at scale. Vivian could have produced a 10-minute argument about why the appointment might fail. Instead, she asked, was she willing? After Samuel asked twice, then I hope she does well. Nicole studied her. You mean that? Vivian took a moment before answering. I think I want to mean it more than I already do. It was not a perfect sentence. That made it honest. Later that afternoon, Gabriel walked through the lobby of Aurelia's oldest San Francisco property without announcing himself. He wore no suit jacket and carried the same faded backpack Vivian had noticed on the plane. A bell attendant recognized him and immediately straightened. Gabriel smiled. Please don't prepare for me. The young man looked uncertain. Sir? Tell me what was already happening before I walked in. The attendant glanced toward the front desk, then back at Gabriel. We were arguing about the luggage room. Good. Show me. 10 minutes later, Gabriel was standing beside 3 employees discussing a shelving problem no executive report would ever mention. It was small. That was the point. The company would not become better because Vivian Harrington had left it. It would become better only if people with power learned to notice what they had once considered too small to deserve their time. The independent facilitator contacted 21 current and former Aurelia employees over the next 3 weeks. 11 agreed to participate. 6 declined. 4 did not respond. Vivian received the list only as numbers. No names were provided in advance. The facilitator, Dr. Lena Morris, explained the terms during their first meeting in a quiet office near Union Square. You are not here to persuade anyone that you have changed, Lena said. You are not here to correct memories. You are not here to explain your intent unless someone asks. Vivian sat with her hands folded in her lap. Then what am I here to do? Hear impact without trying to control the conclusion. Vivian gave a short, uneasy laugh. You make that sound simple. I did not say simple. The first employee entered 10 minutes later. It was a former regional coordinator named Ethan Walsh. Vivian remembered him immediately. He had left Aurelia 2 years earlier. Vivian stood when he entered. Ethan nodded but did not offer his hand. Then Ethan began. He described a planning meeting in which he had tried to warn Vivian that a new guest response system was not ready for rollout. Vivian remembered the meeting. She remembered the deadline. She remembered the pressure from 3 property owners. What she did not remember was Ethan trying 3 times to speak. You kept saying we had already decided, he told her. So I stopped. Vivian felt the explanation rising automatically. The system had been delayed twice. Corporate technology had approved it. The properties needed consistency. What happened after? She asked. The rollout was messy, not catastrophic, just messy. And then you asked why no one had warned you about the training gap. Vivian looked down. I said that? Yes. The room remained quiet. I'm sorry, Vivian said. Ethan's expression did not soften. I didn't come for an apology. I know. Do you? Vivian looked at him. For perhaps the first time in her career, she understood that saying I know could itself be another shortcut. I'm trying to, she said. Ethan nodded once. That was all. The next conversation was harder because the person praised her first. A former property director named Carla Mendoza credited Vivian with teaching her how to read a financial statement and negotiate with ownership groups. Then Carla explained why she had never applied for a regional role under Vivian. I did not want my whole life to become proving I was prepared before you decided I wasn't. Vivian felt that sentence physically, not because Carla called her unfair, because Carla had admired her. Vivian had always assumed admiration meant trust. She was learning they were different things. After each session, Lena required Vivian to sit alone for 15 minutes before discussing it. Her entire professional life had rewarded speed. Here problem. name solution, assign owner, establish deadline. Silence felt unproductive because silence produced nothing she could measure, yet it was the only space in which other people's words remained theirs before she turned them into a project. Meanwhile, Gabriel began spending 2 days each month working from different Aurelia properties instead of the executive headquarters. Not visiting, working. There was a difference. A visit had an arrival time, a prepared agenda, cleaned corridors, and managers waiting with numbers. Working meant sitting in a back office long enough for people to forget he was unusual. In Napa, he spent an afternoon beside a housekeeping scheduler trying to understand why a staffing dashboard showed green even when supervisors felt short-handed. The answer was embarrassingly simple. The dashboard counted scheduled employees but missed extra conference weekend work. "How long has this bothered you?" Gabriel asked. The scheduler shrugged. "Maybe a year. Why didn't it get fixed?" "We had bigger priorities." Gabriel wrote the phrase down. It had made too many small truths invisible. He authorized the analytics team to redesign the metric, but he did something else too. He asked the scheduler to present the issue directly to the next operations meeting. She looked alarmed. "To the executives?" "Yes." "I don't present to executives. You understand the problem better than they do." At the next meeting, she spoke for 6 minutes. No one interrupted. Gabriel made sure of that. When she finished, Samuel leaned toward him and whispered, "You know this meeting is going to run over." "Good," Samuel smiled. "Who are you, and what have you done with Gabriel Reyes?" The changes inside Aurelia were not dramatic enough to trend online. That pleased Gabriel. The company revised its board reporting standard so that every major proposal had to show not only supporting data, but dissenting data, and the method used to classify responses. Quarterly employee listening groups began meeting with rotating board members. Property teams were allowed to flag an issue as early concern without attaching a finished solution. At first, almost no one used the new category. Then one person did, then 6, then 23. Most concerns were ordinary. Scheduling, vendor delays, confusing software, unclear handoffs. That was exactly what Gabriel hoped. Healthy systems did not wait for spectacular problems. One Friday evening, he drove to Daly City for dinner with his mother and Marissa. His mother, Teresa Reyes, had finally seen the airplane video. She placed a bowl of pancit on the table and looked at Gabriel with quiet concern. "Why did you not tell her who you were?" Teresa asked. Marissa laughed. "Here we go." Gabriel served rice onto his plate. "It didn't matter." Of course it mattered. She would have been nicer. That was the problem. Teresa considered this while arranging serving spoons. "Then maybe you needed to see it." Gabriel looked at her. His mother had spent much of her working life in rooms where people underestimated administrative work until something went wrong. She rarely turned those experiences into speeches. "When you were young," she continued, "you wanted to prove people wrong by becoming successful. Then you became successful and decided proving people wrong was childish." Marissa pointed at her mother. "This is why I come to dinner." Teresa ignored her. "Maybe both are too much about other people," she said. "You do your work. You know who you are. Then you try to see who is in front of you." Gabriel smiled. "That sounds simple. Most difficult things do when mothers explain them." Across the bay, Vivian sat alone at her dining table reading a job description. It was for an operations director position at a regional hospitality company with 6 properties. 6 months earlier, she would have considered the role too small. Now she was considering whether she was ready for it at all. Her recruiter had sent 3 opportunities during the week. 2 offered larger titles, but wanted someone who could bring visibility after a difficult year. Vivian understood what that meant. They wanted the controversy and the comeback story as much as they wanted her experience. She declined both. The third company, Harbor Lane Hospitality, had not asked for a public redemption campaign. Its chief executive, a woman named Diane Chen, had asked only one question during their first phone call. "Why should I believe you will lead differently when the pressure returns?" Vivian had no polished answer, so she told the truth. "You shouldn't believe it because I say so." You should build a process that lets people tell you if I don't. Diane had been silent for several seconds. Then she invited Vivian to a second interview. Vivian closed the job description and looked at the crystal plaque on the bookshelf. She had turned it upright again, but she had placed a handwritten card beside it. Clarity, discipline, results. Listening. The fourth word was written in black ink. It did not match the engraving. That was why she kept it there. 4 months after Flight 418, Vivian walked into the lobby of Harbour Lane's Portland property, carrying her own laptop and no assistant. The building was smaller than any hotel she had managed during her final years at Aurelia. 112 rooms, a narrow restaurant facing the street, a lobby fireplace that looked more expensive than it probably was. The morning front desk consisted of 2 employees and a supervisor, who was simultaneously answering a guest question and trying to fix a printer. Diane Chen met Vivian near the elevators. "Still want the job?" she asked. Vivian looked around. "Ask me after the printer." Diane smiled. Vivian had accepted the position 3 weeks earlier, but with conditions she would once have considered intrusive. Her first 6 months included anonymous upward feedback every 30 days. Major operational changes required a staff review period. Her bonus depended partly on employee trust scores, not just revenue and service targets. Vivian had proposed 2 of those conditions herself. She did not announce a comeback. There was no press release with a photograph, no interview about second chances, no article titled From Crisis to Courage. She went to work. On her first day, the Portland team presented a housekeeping handoff problem that was causing rooms to be marked ready before final inspection. Vivian understood the solution within 10 minutes. She could feel the familiar rush of certainty. Change the sequence. Move the inspection responsibility. Update the software rule. Done. Then she remembered Ethan Walsh saying, "You kept saying we had already decided." Vivian closed her notebook. "What have you already tried?" she asked. The room remained quiet for a second longer than necessary. She recognized the pause. People were deciding whether the question was real. A supervisor named Jonah Reed began explaining a temporary checklist they had tested the previous month. Vivian listened. Another employee disagreed with him. A third pointed out a scheduling problem neither solution addressed. The meeting took 45 minutes. The final plan was slower than Vivian's original idea and better than it. Afterward, Diane caught her near the elevator. "That looked painful for you." It was excruciating. "Good," Vivian laughed. Progress, she was learning, did not always feel graceful. At Aurelia, Gabriel's own changes had become more visible. He was still executive chairman, but he had given up 2 external board seats and reduced his conference schedule. He told Samuel that if the company could not function without Gabriel appearing on panels about leadership, then perhaps the company should spend less time talking about leadership. Instead, he began hosting monthly open office hours at different properties. The first session attracted 4 employees, the second attracted 9. By the 6th month, there was a waiting list. Gabriel disliked the waiting list because it turned listening into something scarce, so the company trained dozens of leaders to run the same sessions without him. That mattered more. One rainy Tuesday in San Francisco, Priya Shah entered Gabriel's office carrying a presentation. "You have 10 minutes?" Gabriel looked at the clock. "I have 20. She sat across from him and opened a report on regional service recovery. Halfway through, Gabriel interrupted. "This recommendation assumes the properties can absorb the training hours in 1 quarter. Priya nodded. "Yes. I don't think they can." "I know." Gabriel stopped. Priya smiled slightly. "I wanted to see if you would ask before the final slide." He leaned back. "Was that a test?" "A small one." "Should I be offended?" "Probably not." The final slide contained the frontline feedback showing exactly the capacity concern Gabriel had raised. 6 months earlier, Priya might have hidden the disagreement in an appendix. Now she put it on the screen. Gabriel felt more proud of that than he had of several profitable quarters. "Keep the slide," he said. "I plan to." After she left, Samuel entered without knocking. "You know she just tested the chairman of the company. I noticed." "And you are smiling." "I know." Samuel sat down. We received the 6-month culture review. Employee confidence is up. Early concern reporting is way up. Managers hate the new board packet rules because the decks are longer. Excellent. You are becoming difficult in new and interesting ways. Gabriel looked through the window toward the bay. The company was not fixed. He had stopped using that word. People were not software. Organizations were not machines. Trust could improve and weaken in the same month. A good leader could have a bad habit. A bad meeting could happen inside a healthy team. No process could eliminate human failure. The goal was not perfection. It was making honesty less expensive. Vivian learned something similar in Portland. Her first 30-day feedback report contained 8 positive comments and 3 concerns. One employee wrote that Vivian still answered questions too quickly. Another said she sometimes looked impatient while listening even when she did not interrupt. The old Vivian would have considered facial expression an absurd leadership metric. The new Vivian considered that thought for approximately 5 seconds before laughing at herself. At the next staff meeting, she addressed it. "Apparently my face is still working ahead of my mouth," she said. The room laughed cautiously. "If I look like I have already decided, ask me whether I actually have." A front desk supervisor named Mia raised her hand. "Can we really do that?" Vivian looked at her. "You should." Mia smiled. "Okay. Are you actually listening right now?" Everyone froze. Vivian stared at her for 1 heartbeat, then she laughed harder than anyone else. "Yes, and that was rude, in exactly the way I deserved." The room relaxed. It was a small moment. Vivian thought about it on the flight back to San Francisco that weekend. She was seated in economy, not because she could no longer afford first class, but because the short flight had been booked late, and that was what remained. An older woman sat beside her with a large knitting bag that kept slipping into Vivian's foot space. 4 months earlier, Vivian might have spent the flight measuring the inconvenience. Instead, she helped the woman move the bag under the seat. They spoke for 20 minutes about grandchildren Vivian did not have, and a sweater the woman was making for someone named Lucas. When the woman fell asleep, Vivian turned toward the window. She thought about how strange it was that transformation was often described as a dramatic choice. Most of hers had been smaller. Wait 5 seconds. Ask one more question. Let the other person finish. Do not defend the first version of yourself. When the plane landed, Vivian checked her email. There was a message from Dr. Lena Morris. The final voluntary listening session had concluded. Attached was a short note from one participant who had asked that it be forwarded anonymously. "I do not need Ms. Harrington to become a different person. I hope she becomes more of a person when she is in charge." Vivian read the line twice. It was not forgiveness. It was not condemnation. It was something more useful. A direction. She saved the message and closed her phone. Across the aisle, passengers stood too early and crowded the cabin before the door opened. Vivian remained seated. For once, she did not need to be first. By the following spring, the video from Flight 418 had become old internet history. It still existed. Nothing truly disappeared online. But new scandals had replaced it. New arguments had taken over feeds, and the 47 seconds that had once seemed large enough to define 2 people had become something strangers occasionally rediscovered and shared with captions neither Gabriel nor Vivian could control. Gabriel had stopped reading the comments months earlier. Vivian had stopped searching her name. Both decisions had been harder than either admitted. Aurelia's annual leadership summit returned to Honolulu almost 1 year after the flight. The company had considered moving the event because of the association, but Gabriel refused. "A city did not cause our problem," he told the planning team. "We did." The summit itself was different. There were fewer keynote speeches and more working sessions. Property employees led panels that executives once would have moderated. One session was titled, "What Leaders Learn Too Late." Gabriel disliked the title because it sounded dramatic. Marissa loved it. "You are finally attending a conference with an honest name," she told him over the phone. On the second morning, Gabriel sat in the back of a ballroom while Eleanor Park, now the permanent head of Aurelia's Western Division, spoke with 3 property leaders about early problem reporting. Eleanor had surprised almost everyone, except the people who had worked directly with her. She was slower than Vivian had been in some decisions, and faster in others. Financial performance remained strong. Employee confidence had improved. More importantly, disagreement no longer disappeared from meeting notes. During questions, a young supervisor stood. "How do you know when listening becomes indecision?" Elena smiled. "You don't always know. Listening is not the opposite of deciding. It is part of deciding. Eventually, you still have to choose, and sometimes people will disagree with you. The goal is not to make everyone happy. The goal is to make sure disagreement had a real chance to affect the choice." Gabriel wrote the sentence down. Even after a year, he was still collecting other people's language for things he once believed he already understood. At lunch, Samuel found him outside overlooking the ocean. "You know Elena is getting better reviews than you." "Good. That answer is becoming predictable," Gabriel smiled. Samuel handed him a folder. Harbour Lane renewed Vivian's contract. "Promoted her, actually." Gabriel looked at him. "Why do you have that in a folder?" "Because Diane Chen called about a joint training program. Harbour Lane wants to participate in our supervisor exchange next year." Gabriel opened the summary. Vivian's name appeared near the bottom as Regional Operations Director. No photograph, no comeback language, just a title and a responsibility. "Did she ask to be part of it?" Gabriel said. "Diane says Vivian suggested the companies work together, but specifically asked not to lead the program." Gabriel nodded. Samuel watched him. "You could call her." "Why?" "Because normal people occasionally speak after life-changing events." "You have a very generous definition of normal." Samuel laughed and walked away. Gabriel did not call. Not then. Vivian's new work was not a project he needed to supervise. That was another lesson. Respect sometimes meant giving people room to become someone outside your observation. 3 weeks later, chance did what Samuel had suggested. Gabriel was at San Francisco International Airport for an early flight to Seattle. The terminal was crowded with business travelers, families, and people standing too close to charging outlets. He wore dark jeans, a gray sweater, and carried the same faded backpack. The backpack had become mildly famous after the viral video. Marissa had threatened to replace it simply to stop strangers from recognizing him. Gabriel refused. Near Gate 62, he heard his name. "Gabriel?" He turned. Vivian stood several feet away, carrying a small roller bag and a paper coffee cup. For a moment, neither moved. She looked different without looking transformed. Her hair was shorter, her clothes were simpler than the tailored suits she had once worn every day. But the largest difference was harder to name. She seemed less arranged. "Vivian," he said, "I wasn't sure it was you until I saw the backpack." Gabriel looked down. "Apparently this is my brand now." She smiled. The ease of the exchange surprised both of them. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Portland. You?" "Seattle." They stood beside the windows while aircraft moved slowly across the wet runway. Vivian was the first to mention the past. "I heard about the changes at Aurelia. I heard about Harbour Lane." She looked amused. "Hospitality is a small world. Smaller than it pretends to be." A boarding announcement sounded from a nearby gate. Vivian looked at Gabriel's backpack again. "I think about that flight sometimes." Gabriel nodded. "So do I." "For a while I thought it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me." He said nothing. "Then I realized the worst part wasn't losing the job. It was understanding how many warnings I had received before that day, and how skilled I had become at translating them into reasons I was right." Gabriel watched a baggage cart cross the runway. "That is a difficult thing to see." It was. Vivian turned toward him. "I also spent months being angry that you happened to be the person sitting there." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "Not because of anything you did," she added. "Because if it had been almost anyone else, maybe nothing would have happened." "Maybe." That bothered me. Then Lena asked me why I was focusing on the probability of being caught instead of the probability of repeating the behavior. Gabriel smiled faintly. "She sounds efficient." "Terrifyingly." They both laughed. Then Vivian became serious. "I owe you something better than the apology I gave you that night." Gabriel looked at her. "You don't owe me a performance." "I know. That's why this took a year." She set her coffee on the ledge beside the window. I'm sorry I treated you like your presence required an explanation. I'm sorry I became more respectful after I learned your title. And I'm sorry I spent years making people around me earn the patience I expected automatically for myself. Gabriel let the words remain between them. Then he nodded. Thank you. Vivian exhaled. That's it? Were you hoping for a certificate? She laughed. No. Maybe I still expect meetings to end with action items. Some habits survive. Another announcement called Vivian's flight. She picked up her coffee. I should go. Yes. She took 2 steps, then turned back. For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't tell me who you were before I sat down. Gabriel considered that. I'm not sure I was glad at the time. Fair. Vivian walked toward her gate. Gabriel watched her disappear into the boarding line, then looked around the terminal. A year earlier, he might have interpreted the entire story as evidence that character was revealed when people believed no one important was watching. He still believed that. But he had learned something else. Character was also revealed by what people did after everyone had watched them fail. Gabriel's flight to Seattle boarded 20 minutes later. His seat was 7C, an aisle seat in the main cabin. Aurelia's travel team had booked late, because the trip had been added to his schedule only the night before. As Gabriel reached the row, he found a young father trying to settle a little girl into the window seat while balancing 2 backpacks and a paper bag of snacks. The man's boarding pass showed 7B. He looked embarrassed when Gabriel stopped. Sorry, the father said. We're getting organized. We'll move everything. Take your time. The little girl looked up at Gabriel with serious eyes. My backpack has a rabbit, she announced. Gabriel looked at the pink backpack wedged under the seat. That seems important. His name is Captain. Even more important. The father smiled with visible relief. Gabriel placed his own faded backpack in the overhead bin and sat beside them. No one recognized him. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Gabriel looked through the window across the aisle at the terminal where he had just spoken with Vivian. Their conversation had not resolved the previous year into a neat lesson. He was grateful for that. Some stories became less true when people made them too clean. Vivian had lost her position, her bonus, her equity, and much of the public identity she had built over 15 years. Those consequences had been real. They had not secretly been gifts. She would never describe the day she was fired as something wonderful that happened for a reason. Pain did not need to be renamed as luck in order to become useful. What mattered was what came next. In Portland, Vivian arrived just before noon and went directly to Harbor Lane's smallest conference room. 8 department leaders were already waiting for the weekly operating meeting. A year earlier, Vivian would have walked in with the agenda printed, priorities ranked, and expected decisions listed beside each item. Now the first page contained 2 columns, what we know, what we may be missing. Diane Chen had laughed the first time she saw the format. You have turned uncertainty into a template, she said. Vivian had admitted this was probably the only way she knew how to make peace with it. The team began with staffing for the summer season. 10 minutes in, Jonah disagreed with Vivian's preferred hiring timeline. She felt the familiar response in her chest. Not anger exactly, speed, the urge to explain why he was overlooking 3 dependencies she had already considered. Then Mia, now promoted to front desk manager, caught Vivian's expression from across the table. Are you actually listening? Mia asked. The room went quiet for half a second. Then everyone smiled. The question had become a small tradition. Vivian leaned back. Not enough. Jonah, finish. He did. 5 minutes later, Vivian changed her recommendation, not because disagreement had to win, because this time it deserved the chance to. At Aurelia, changes continued in similarly ordinary ways. The company did not become perfect. Leaders still rushed decisions and reports still needed correction. Gabriel was encouraged because problems were visible sooner. 6 months after the Honolulu summit, Aurelia's board reviewed its annual culture report. Employee trust scores had risen significantly, but Gabriel stopped the presentation when the communications team proposed using the improvement as an external marketing claim. No, he said. The vice president of communications looked confused. Why not? These are strong results. Because trust is not a campaign. Stakeholders want evidence that we improved. Then show them the governance changes. Publish the methodology. Let the numbers speak if people ask. But we are not putting employee trust on a billboard. Elaine Mercer smiled from across the table. You have become suspicious of slogans. Gabriel looked at the slide behind her. I have become suspicious of anything that sounds better than it behaves. The board approved the report without a marketing campaign. After the meeting, Gabriel walked downstairs instead of taking the private elevator to the garage. In the lobby, Priya Shah was talking with a group of new analysts. She waved him over. We are explaining the early concern system, she said. One analyst looked nervous, so Gabriel stepped back from the center of the group. Priya understands it better than I do, he said. Listen to her. Then he did the same. That evening, Gabriel drove to Daly City for his mother's birthday dinner. The house was crowded with cousins, food, and overlapping conversations. Marissa asked whether he had spoken with Vivian at the airport. Did you talk? Yes. And? Gabriel looked across the room at his mother, laughing with two nieces. She seems well. Marissa smiled. That is enough. Yes, Gabriel said. It is. Across town, Vivian had returned to San Francisco for the weekend. Her apartment looked different than it had the night she was fired. The dining table was no longer decorative. There were books on it, a half-finished puzzle Nicole had brought over, and a stack of handwritten notes from Harbor Lane employees after a successful opening in Eugene. Vivian still owned beautiful things. She still liked good hotels, tailored jackets, efficient airports, and rooms with views. Growth had not required pretending she no longer cared about comfort or ambition. It had required learning that comfort did not create entitlement and ambition did not create wisdom. On the bookshelf, the Aurelia plaque remained beside the handwritten card. Clarity, discipline, results, listening. One day Mia had visited and noticed it. You know you could order a new plaque, she said. Vivian shook her head. Then it would look like I always knew. She preferred the mismatch. It reminded her that some of the most important parts of a person were added after the polished version was already finished. A year and a half after Flight 418, Gabriel returned to Honolulu for a routine property review. He boarded in San Francisco, wearing a simple blue shirt, dark pants, and carrying the same backpack. His assigned seat was beside a middle-aged woman reading a magazine. She stood to let him in. Window? She asked. Yes. Thank you. Gabriel sat down. The woman returned to her magazine. No confusion, no questions about whether he belonged there. No one cared who he was. The plane lifted above the bay and turned west toward the Pacific. Gabriel watched the coastline disappear beneath the clouds. He thought about how easily people mistook status for value, certainty for strength, silence for agreement, and success for proof that nothing needed to change. Vivian had once believed respect should rise with importance. Gabriel had once believed principles could survive without enough presence. Both had been wrong in different ways, and both had learned that dignity was not something people earned after revealing the right title, the right resume, or the right reason for being in the room. It was the starting point. The same was true of listening. You did not offer it only after someone proved their argument was important. You offered enough of it to discover what importance you might have missed. Outside the window, the Pacific stretched beneath the aircraft in a field of blue and white. Gabriel rested his head against the seat and closed his eyes. There would be more difficult meetings, more mistakes, more moments when old habits returned faster than new wisdom. That no longer frightened him. A meaningful life was not built by never being wrong. It was built by becoming harder to protect from the truth. And sometimes, the moment that takes everything from you is not the end of your story. Sometimes it is the first moment you finally stop defending the person you were long enough to become the person you still have time to be. Fim da narrativa.